More women experience anxiety than men, so it is a more prevalent condition for women.
I would have thought that one of the main anxiety relieving things in life would be to not have children. Wouldn't you say that?
Well, I can tell you that...
Someone said you're only as happy as your unhappiest child.
Well, I can tell you that my wife would worry far more about the children than I do. I can put them out of my mind. But she's constantly, oh, I'm worried about his drinking and I'm worried about him smoking. Whereas I'm not the slightest bit anxious about it.
No, the fruit falleth not far from the treeth. How do you treat it?
All sorts of different ways of treating it. Some of it can be counselling and giving people strategies to deal with their anxiety, to stop the negative self-talk in their heads. Some of it can be medication. I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not in the business of prescribing cures, but I am in the business of saying if you think you might have a problem, get on the Beyond Blue website. There's an anxiety checklist. You can give yourself a little run through, and then if you think that there's an issue, reach out and get help.
I'm just looking around here. How many of our folks sat the anxiety checklist? Scorcher gave himself a 2. I gave him Kate, you're a 4. I was a 0.
Maybe that's showing the gender divide just in this radio studio. Kate's doing the worrying for you.
Julia, I have a medical profession in my family, and he always says when stories break and someone's under a great deal of pressure, he says 2 weeks is about as much constant pressure as a human being can take. What about anxiety in your time as Prime Minister, where you had far more than 2 weeks? Did you get anxious?
I didn't get...
And don't answer anything you don't want to answer.
No. I didn't get anxiety in this, sort of clinical concerning sense that we're talking about now. I never felt that I was in the zone that we're talking about now. Of course, walking into question time with your folders across your arm, about to go into that sort of push and shove for an hour and a half, you wouldn't be human if you didn't have a sort of kick up in the adrenaline, and I could feel my adrenaline kicking in.
But what about picking up the paper day after day, knowing that on radio, on television, that you're being trashed and criticised and the like? Were you able... you're able to toughen your skin up and go, oh, that's part of politics?
Yes, I was. And I had thought about that in the lead in to being a more and more senior politician. I had watched some senior politicians when I was just a baby one, and I'd watched some that I thought got their whole self-worth tied up with whether or not they were getting good or bad media. So they were quite a different human being on a day of good media headlines than a day of bad media headlines. Yeah. And I'd kind of watched that and thought, that's really, it's a roller coaster to put yourself on, and it's fundamentally irrational because at the end of the day, you're the same human being, whether the headlines are bad or good, nothing actually has changed inside you.
I would have thought the stress that you were under was not the stress from your opponents, but the stress that would have been caused by you worrying about who was behind you.
Oh, look,
people on the same side ready to stab you in the back.
Oh, anyone in mind?
No.
But
it's a hypothetical question.
Look, anybody who does the job of Prime Minister is stepping up for a relentless job, and they're, going to have to think about how they keep themselves, well and make sure they're sleeping right and all the rest of it. For me, there were some particular pressures, being the first woman, some internal issues in the Labor Party, all the rest of it. But none of any of that is the kind of experience that we're talking about now and we're asking people to reach out for help around.